Inside the Birds is back. What's going on, everybody? Geoff Mosher and Adam Caplan here. Hope everyone is enjoying their summer. Hope everybody checked out and enjoyed our last Inside the Birds, a fusion of our interviews with Brian Westbrook and Andrew Brandt from ITB TV. Surely Brian's outlook on Miles Sanders, Boston Scott, and Deuce Staley come from an excellent source, as Brian is one of the best who's ever done it for the Eagles. And I think Adam Andrews' commentary on this upcoming NFL season, playing through the COVID pandemic and all that that entails, was really interesting as we kind of head into an important time period here. We're a week away from the proposed start of training camp, and the league and the players appear to be very close to a return to work agreement. And Eagles rookies we know have reported. And so it's not going to be what we're normally accustomed to, but training camp does seem now legitimately around the corner.
Yeah, actually, here's the thing that is disappointing. And I understand why it's been a back and forth, but because the players in the league cannot agree on the ramp-up period, they're going to agree soon. Mm-hmm. And it's somewhere going to be, somewhere around 14 days. It's not going to be 21 days, but whatever it is, we're probably not going to have a training camp practice until mid-August.
Right.
Because as this drops Thursday morning, which is the 23rd, the players will not be reporting until the 28th, which will be Monday. And then you're having somewhere around a 14-day ramp-up period. So more or less around mid-August or just before it. So it's just, we've never seen training camps actually have a practice starting so late. It is what it is. And as we get into this show, because obviously a lot of this is going to be discussed about roster trimming and who's been cut and so forth. This is a new beginning, and hopefully the only time that we're ever going to have to deal with the training camp.
Yeah, and in a sense, I mean, everything is semantics, but when we've been reporting over the last few podcasts that we've been hearing from some sources in the NFL that they felt that training camp was not going to begin on time, they're almost right, even if this thing starts July 28th, for what you just mentioned. Having a bunch of guys doing strength training and working out, getting physically in shape is not exactly what coaches and people think of as the start of training camp. Right. They think of guys on the field practicing football. And so it looks like we might be a few weeks away from that, and we'll see what results. So as the time that we record this is about 11:15 on Wednesday, July 22nd. And by the time people listen to this, Adam, it might be official, but we're just going off what we know now. And one of the things that we'll start off talking about in this edition is the reality of a downsized roster. Now, you had put on Twitter the other day, you keep hearing, even though as we record this, it's not official yet, that teams are preparing as if rosters are going to be at 80,
yep.
Which means for a lot of teams, the Eagles have already made a few cuts, but that's 10 players that have to be shaved off every roster.
Well, depending on where you're at. Yeah.
Depending on where they're at.
Right.
Yeah.
You could have up to 90, but you could have as many as you want up to 90. It's going to be difficult. Well, I know it's funny because I was checking our Facebook page, our Facebook board for Inside the Birds. And, I didn't do it. Someone did smartly. And there's like a really long thread of everyone's giving their predictions of, okay, who are the guys you think were going to be cut? And people are asking us. So obviously we're going to cover that in just a second. But we mentioned this before, that this is not going to be good. This really applies to the entire league. It really sucks for coaches and scouts who took a lot of pride into some of the lower end players who they thought who could challenge. Here's another example. Guys like Corey Clement,
mm-hmm.
We probably would not have learned about them because they would not have had an offseason. They're not going to have any preseason games. You should mention that as well. There won't be any preseason games. So this is where Corey Clement really shined in their Eagles offseason in 2017, Geoff, in their OTAs, mm-hmm. where they started to see some things they weren't really aware of, how well it could catch the football.
Yeah.
And also, at training camp, he was good, but also in the preseason game. So it's going to be especially hard, Geoff, for coaches and executives to evaluate players this summer.
Yeah, and we're going to have to get into in this episode how they wind up doing that and what corresponding moves they can make. They've already, as many people know by now, they've released Alex Ellis, who was a tight end, Khalil Tate, who was a rookie free agent, kind of offensive weapon type signing, Keegan Render, he was an offensive lineman from Iowa, and Trevor Williams, which I think of all the four names, Alex Ellis and Trevor Williams were most interesting because they played in the league before, and you thought because of depth at their respective positions with the Eagles that maybe they'd have a chance to get on a team. But you have some information I know on Render, who just, I guess, decided that he was just not going to play anymore.
Yeah, so I'm told that he quit. He told his agent that he didn't want to play anymore. Now, this happens. There are probably a half a dozen, 4 to 6 players around the league every year that once, within 24 to 48 hours, they just decide they don't want to play anymore. Some are not even reported. They just were waived. They're generally younger players. Or a veteran who's been in the league for a long time says, you know what, I'm done. Now, I know we had some questions about, are some of these going to be COVID related? And they may want to be, but what I'm told with Renner had nothing to do with it. He just decided he didn't want to play anymore. He was not even going to sleep on it. He just didn't want to play, and the club was informed. So they waived him. Alex Ellis was waived. He was not claimed. Trevor Williams was waived. Terminated. His contract was terminated. So he's free to sign anywhere. Yeah, let's get to Ellis and Williams. So Ellis, you're right. It was surprising in that. So now it's Josh Perkins by default. It's their third tight end. They only have 4 on the roster now. They have an undrafted kid who
they like.
Yeah, they do. Toe guy who they like to take a look at. But I would think with Richard Rodgers signing elsewhere that they probably would bring in a veteran tight end to compete for that third job. Because, man, last year they were playing that a crazy game of only having 2 tight ends active, Geoff.
Right.
That's not a game you want to be doing where even I think there might have been points, I'd have to look it up, where they only had 2 tight ends on their 53-man roster and had a tight end in their practice squad. So Josh Perkins is a guy that has some ability, but he's not a great blocker. He's been on and off the roster, as you know, Geoff. He was waived last summer. He was on their practice squad through week 13. Then they signed him off their practice squad. So I don't know about you, man, but I think it's a little dubious to not have a veteran just at least to compete for that third job.
Yeah, and I don't know if that guy's coming anytime soon. It could be one of those guys who you pick up after the final wave of cuts, and then certain guys clear waivers, and you bring him in. I agree with you. I think the ability to keep a guy on a practice squad but then play him this year, which is a kind of a newer rule, right? You have 2 guys on your practice squad that you can make active on game day.
Right.
That might help a guy like Togai as a 4th tight end in case the Eagles have some injuries or just want more special teams and a guy who's ascending if he's doing well. But I agree that I think you need a good 3rd tight end. And I'm not sure. Look, Josh Perkins will be here for all of training camp. He'll have a chance to at least compete for it. And if they feel like he's even improved yet again, because he did make some contributions. I mean, he caught a really big touchdown last year in December from Carson Wentz. But I would at least like the Eagles to consider a veteran out there, someone who can block a little bit, because you need that.
Here are the guys that are available that really would fit. Ed Dixon's a journeyman who was more of a pass catcher early in his career with Baltimore, but then he became more of a blocker. David Morgan, who was a draftee of the Vikings, who's a terrific. I'll tell you what, just blocking, he's top 10. That's all he does. Then there are just a bunch of Jeff Swaim's out there, who's just an average player. Luke Stocker, who's a real journeyman. In terms of Lance Kendricks, who's more of a 2nd or 3rd tight end who would have value. Charles Clay is really only a pass catcher. Right. That's really it when you look at it. Scott Simonson, who's a journeyman who was with the Giants, and Bradley Sowell, you might remember, who was actually, this makes sense. Bradley Sowell, who was with the Bears, he was actually a tackle who was converted to tight end.
Right.
So there are names out there that they could look at, but you're right. They're obviously not going to spend anything.
Yeah, I mean, wouldn't you rather just make that decision after training camp, though, and see what the waiver wire looks like before you kind of bring in one of the names that you just mentioned?
Well, the thing is, you don't have to give them a signing bonus. You go
That's
look.
a good point.
They have leverage now because there are a lot of those guys out there. Go here it is, 1 year veteran minimum, no signing bonus, no guaranteed money. Obviously, if you make the roster, if you haven't applied for termination pay, your base salary will be fully guaranteed if you're on the opening day roster.
Right.
Look, they played the roster shuffle with Richard Rodgers over a series of years. He just could not stay healthy. So that position is value. So Render, we talked about the Trevor Williams one. Did that one? I'm like, why would you do this now? That one surprised me.
Yeah, I was a little shocked by that, Adam. The only thing I can think of, and this would just be my speculation, is that he felt like he could go somewhere that he may have asked for his release and felt like he could go somewhere else and get a more legitimate shot to compete. Although I don't know why the Eagles wouldn't be giving him a good shot to compete.
Who else? Yeah, but that's it, Geoff. Who do they
who would he have to beat out? Yeah. I have no idea. I wonder if they had already given off signs that he might be among the cuts, and he just said, "We'll do it now because I want a chance to latch on to a team that I think will give me a better chance."
Yeah, well, look, my sense is the Eagles are like a bunch of teams that they're aware of the 80-man cut down, and with that in mind, sure, they're starting to trim the roster. Mm-hmm. They don't have. They could just wait till it's actually official, but they're doing it now. But when you really look at it, right? Let's just stay a cornerback for a while. Maddox is competing for the outside job against Sidney Jones. Right. Whoever doesn't win it will be their fourth corner. It's going to be if it's Maddox, then it's obviously Slay, Maddox on the outside.
Don't forget Rasul Douglas. He's still technically here.
It's Jones. It's Jones backing up Maddox, and it's Roby Coleman as the slot corner. And the fourth corner would be Jones, and LeBlanc is the backup slot. And you have Rasul Douglas competing for a job. They'll keep 5 corners. I don't know if they'll keep 6 unless somebody earns it. But Trevor Williams could have been that guy who was competing against Jones to be the fourth corner. Who's to say that Trevor Williams could have done it? By the way, he started over 15 games in his career.
I know. I know. I get. Are we ruling out Rasul Douglas completely?
No, but I'm putting him just competing for a spot. No, I know I guess he's got a DB sort of consultant who's helping him. The tweets are out there with video. It looks good, but we know Rasul Douglas's problem. He can never sustain anything. He last year's offseason, if I recall correctly, was really, really good. Training camp is inconsistent, and the season was being inconsistent would be putting it mildly, got benched. So you can't trust him. Right. And as you mentioned, Prince Smith is a guy they want to look at because he's got return ability and he could really fly.
Right. Same thing with. Go ahead. I was going to say, do they have the other kid, Graybill, who they could potentially like? But I'm just surprised you had a veteran here. I'm surprised they didn't let him at least compete and see. I'm sorry,
I'll find out.
Arnold is what I meant. But
Braylon Arnold, who's more of a safety. But I will find out, Geoff, for our listeners that what happened with Trevor Williams. That caught me by surprise. And then. Other than that, I don't see anyone who is like you go, okay, well, Alex Ellis, we just mentioned. Other than that, Geoff, Render, and by the way, the Peters decision that Ellis was cut at the same time that Peters was re-signed. That was a transaction that was tied together. And then, other than that, I think they're either at 86 or 87. Because people want to know, we might as well get into it. Who do you think would be candidates to be released?
Well, let's go through positions. So, like offensive line, they gave a lot of money to Luke Juriga out of Western Michigan for a rookie. So I feel like Luke Juriga is safe to make this team. Render's already been
not to make the team. I wouldn't agree with that.
I'm sorry. You're right. To be on the practice squad, right? To be on the 80-man roster is what I mean
for now, and then obviously make it through training camp. Right. It's weird for me to say no preseason. Just get to the end of the line, and then they'll make a decision. But who else are you looking at here?
Well, they signed a guy out of Iowa State, Julian Good-Jones. I mean, he plays guard. I don't want to say that they're deep at guard, but now with Jason Peters and Pryor and Herbig and Sua Opeta, it makes me wonder if a guy like Julian Good-Jones out of Iowa State is going to stick on this team.
Yeah, Herbig is really just a center. I'm told that's what I asked to get that clarified. They really only look at him as a center right now. But you're right. Pryor's there. Jack Driscoll. Jack Driscoll, Juriga, and Good-Jones. I would say Good-Jones would be a candidate to be released of the group because of the move that was just made with the kid that was cut, Render. So they're down a guy. I don't know that they want to cut anyone else from that position. So I would agree that Good-Jones would be the candidate. Sure.
Okay. Any of the quarterbacks you think not going to be on because they have, Hurts now, and they have Lauletta, they have Wentz, and they have Sudfeld. That would be 4 quarterbacks. Correct?
Yeah, I would say Lauletta. Right. I would say Lauletta would be in danger because if you had preseason games, then I would say you probably would not cut him because because Wentz wouldn't play other than the third game. He wouldn't play. Sudfeld's the backup, so you have to be very, very careful of how much you pay him. And Hurts needs the reps. He get a ton of reps. So you would need Lauletta for sure. You just couldn't cut him. Now, Geoff, all you're getting is training camp reps. I don't know that you need Lauletta. I know that they're happy that he started to develop a little bit, and just in terms of physically, he got bigger physically, he got stronger.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I would say he would be a guy. He would be a candidate.
So that's right. So we have Good Jones at guard. We have Lauletta possibly a quarterback. Mm-hmm. Let's look at running back. This is really interesting because we know the Eagles want to take a look at Killins from UCF and Mike Warren from Cincinnati, both of their rookie free agent signings. We know they want to take a look at Holyfield, and we know they brought back Corey Clement, but that's a lot of running backs here that they have to decide between, knowing that not all of them are going to make the team and maybe not even the practice squad. So I wonder if they're looking at it and saying, we can shave one off here.
Yeah, lack of reps. And another thing I'll add, and this will come into lack of reps, if they sign LaShawn McCoy, if they add the veteran that we think they're going to do, then that to me is going to sort of impact the running back roster. Someone's going to have to go. You're not going to keep 7 because there's no preseason. If you had preseason, you would be less likely to cut one of these guys. Mm-hmm. I would say either one. I don't see Holyfield getting cut. That would surprise me because I had heard pretty strongly that they have plans for him to hopefully be their third back, compete for be the third back of the future. Mm-hmm. Have they had a real offseason and preseason? But they didn't have either. So it's going to be sort of a wait and see situation, Geoff. But I would say you're right. I think Killins and Warren, they like to keep, but one of them would be in danger if they would sign a veteran. But for right now, they may be safe. They may be. No, I don't think Corey.
No? Okay, I'm just wondering if they wanted to go young.
Way too much. Well, he's not old, but he has so much value on specials, goal line, red zone, third down. I mean, he's susceptible because I don't think he has any guaranteed money in his contract.
Right. So okay, so that'll be interesting. So I guess we'll have to look at then either Killins or Warren, right, as maybe a guy that and I think of those two, if I were to guess, and I'm just doing that, I know Warren. Andrew DeCecco's been very high on Warren, a really good, strong power runner. Very rarely goes down. Killen's more of a speed guy, right? So I wonder if
fast.
Yeah. You kind of wonder. They kind of got a lot of explosion. I think they're looking for a little bit of a power guy. So I feel like Warren might get the benefit of the doubt over a Killins in that situation, but we'll just have to see. That's obviously a personnel department decision. Tight end. I mean, I don't think they're going to shave off any
no
more.
Way.
They've only got 4. Yeah. Wide receiver.
Well, let me say one thing. If there was a veteran they liked, I would think Perkins would be out. That's just my guess.
Right, but then you're subbing 1 for 1. You're not going to.
Right. You're right. Yeah. Go ahead. So receiver.
Yeah. Wide receivers got some interesting names. They seemingly like the kid from Morgan State that they signed, Manasseh Bailey, the rookie free agent. They have a couple of holdovers from last year who kind of played some roles down the stretch.
Well, they have 13. Right. They have 13. Yeah. Burnett's one of them. I would think.
I look at Shelton Gibson, and I was just going to say, I look at Shelton Gibson, and I'm like, that's got to be
everyone. Everybody. It's funny. I was telling a story on our message board about. Look, the reality is when he was drafted, he came from an offense that was so detrimental to development. So few West Virginia receivers during Dana Holgerson's career at West Virginia ever became NFL players. They just have a history of guys not making it, and Gibson was another one of them. That they finally, it's the funny thing is when he was drafted, he had such a bad training camp. The coaches wanted him off the team, and because he was a draftee, he made it. He was just kept there, and then when you look at Geoff 2 years ago when he had the unbelievable preseason, oh my God, he was like, wow, the light went on. Well. If you remember, despite all the injuries they had at receiver that year, the coaches wouldn't play him because they didn't think he could handle everything they were giving him. And the only reason why he was back last year is because they got destroyed with injury. Right. So to bring him up, I would say they're at 13 receivers right now.
Yeah,
because there's no preseason.
Could you shave 2 off? You think?
I was just going to say that. Go to 11. Exactly what I was going to say. The guys that I think are being challenged to stay will be Bailey, Robert Davis, Marcus Green, Burnett, and Gibson. I would expect 2 guys are in danger of being part of that 80 cut down. That would be my opinion on that.
Yeah, I would think so too. All right, so we've gone offensive line, we've gone quarterback, we've gone tight end, running back, wide receivers. So it looks like we've at least identified 5 potential cuts right there, just depending on which one of those receivers they decide to go through.
Yep.
Let's go to the. I'm curious on defensive line here because they're really deep at defensive tackle. We've gone through that, right? They may have the best collection of D tackles in the league, and so you would ordinarily think, Adam, if we're really deep in one area, we can shave off here. But one of their rookie free agent signings was a guy that they also really like, and that's the kid from Michigan State, Raekwon Williams.
Yep, he ain't going anywhere. I would think that Hector or Huggins would be in danger if it's only going to be 80, not 75. I would say that one is potentially released. I would be shocked if Raekwon Williams was cut because they believe internally that Williams will compete against Rush. And Rush, I was told his goal was to drop weight. He was over 350. They like him around 335. So we'll see. I mean, because he's not here. They're not practicing yet. They're not going to know yet. But I would say Huggins and Hector would be potentially on the cut line there. We'll see.
Do you think only one? I mean, is this an area where you can get away with maybe shaving two? I don't know. With lines, you're trying to not eliminate too many people because you need all the practice bodies. But
right. But again, you don't need preseason games, so you could just shuffle out. Now the Heat here, folks here, if you're not in Jersey or Philly or Delaware or New York, the Heat here is an unbelievable. It's in the mid to high 90s here, and the humidity is over 100. So Geoff makes a good point here with guys wearing down. You got to be careful. And the other problem is, and J.C. Treader, the president of the NFLPA, talked about this. When you compare it 2011 to 20 in the 9 years, the players were coming out of lockout, but they could work out. Remember, they were able to work out on their own without any restrictions. Here, because of COVID, you couldn't always work out on your own. You'd have to figure out different ways. So he said, listen, this is a concern. And that is the other reason on the ramp-up period, Geoff, the players want a long ramp-up period because they have information that would say that back in 2011, the strains and a bunch of Achilles injuries were way up because they were not. Some guys were not in shape.
Interesting. It's you don't want to get too thin on the lines. You're right. The heat, the wear and tear makes.
I would say one guy. I would say one guy would be
one guy. What about end? I mean, would
I don't see it. Yeah, I don't see it.
But they have so many, Adam. I mean, we have 7 guys we consistently talk about: Avery, Barnett, Graham, Deshaun Hall, Sharif Miller, Joe Osman, and Josh Sweat. That's 7 guys.
And Matt Leo has an exemption, so he wouldn't be
right. Leo is an exemption, yeah. But do you think that a guy like Deshaun Hall, who was the star of last year's camp, might just be a victim?
Well,
if there's going to be one,
I would assume he will be. Although he still counts against the roster. The Deshaun Hall could be on PUP. In fact, I would be shocked if he's not. He would have to be almost because you can't go back on if he's not. You can't.
That's right.
If you don't start him on PUP at the beginning of training camp, you can't go on. Right. But he unfortunately counts against the roster. I don't see it because they have not with the count against the roster. They have 8.
Right.
That's enough. No, I don't see anyone be cut. That's enough. That's the right number, I think.
All right, so then let's move to linebacker. I can't imagine. They only have 8. So are they really going to cut a linebacker?
Yeah, I don't see it. I agree.
Yeah, I think they need, including Dante Olson, I think they need all those guys they can get. Cornerback, even though it's not a great position of depth, maybe, you have Prince Smith and we mentioned Aaron Graybill. They have another guy whose name stuck out at me where I thought, Tremont Smith from Central Arkansas.
He could run, yeah.
Okay. And then they have a defensive back, 2 of them rookie free agents. One's Michael Jacquet, and the other is Elijah Riley, who I feel like, those were the type of signings that maybe one of those guys gets trimmed off.
Yeah, I would say that, and I don't
know. Did
I
pronounce that correctly, by the way, Jacquet? Because he went to Louisiana Lafayette.
Yeah, Nate Jacquet, right, Nate Jacquet. So I don't know what the guaranteed money that they gave Arnold and Riley. The Eagles are usually top 5 of giving out signing bonus money, but I just don't know. I don't have it in front of me. I would say that for sure, either Arnold, Riley, Jacquet, one of them is susceptible.
What about the Tremont Smith guy? Do you think they like him because of the speed, huh?
Speed, and he's 6 feet even. That
True.
here's another one. How about Craig James? I know he was forced to play
That's a
because of
good one.
injuries. Yeah,
Yeah.
I mean, he has experience, and he knows the defense because he was there last year. But I don't know if they need him anymore. But we'll see.
But there's at least one corner here that you can trim and not, or one defensive back, because some of these guys are hybrids that you could trim, and it's not like they're going to be noticeably absent from this roster.
It depends on what guaranteed money they give these undrafted guys. I would say out of Prince Smith, Arnold, Riley, Jaquette, I would think one of them would be susceptible. So that again, getting down to 80 will not be difficult. If by surprise, because no teams I spoke with said 75, they said 80 to me. Right. But if it happened to be 75, then it becomes a problem. Then which is just it. We admit, folks, if you haven't heard the show, a couple shows ago, we talked about what some of the coaches had told us, and I thought one coach had a great idea. He's like, "Look, why cut them down to 80? Just if you're not going to let them practice, just let them go through the virtual program in the preseason. They're not going to be with the team on the field, so just let them go through. Let them watch the meetings, Geoff." Let them watch the practice tape so they could see what it's like. And then cut them down to when you have to get down to 53, they're off the roster. And then you can see if you want to have them on the practice squad. Why do you have to cut them now? I just don't agree with the way they're handling it.
Yeah, I think it's very fishy. I don't love it either. I'm looking here at safety, by the way, and they only have 6. No, I'm sorry. They have 5 safeties. So I cannot imagine any of these guys getting cut, and someone could say,
well, no, actually, depending if you count Arnold, no, they have 8. I mean, McLeod, Mills is a safety, Epps, Parks, Rudy Ford. I know he's a special teamer, but technically a safety. Right. Kayvon Wallace, Arnold and Riley.
Oh, I'm sorry. You know what? I'm looking at the roster on the website, and I forgot they don't add the have the rookies separate. So I forgot about that.
Yeah.
So who we got? Wallace adds to the mix, and who else that you mentioned?
Rudy Ford, Marcus Epps, Parks, McLeod, Mills, Graylin Arnold, who's going to be a safety.
Okay, well, they have him listed here as like DB, so I didn't.
Yeah, and Elijah Riley. So,
yeah, so I do think that they could potentially trim off 2 D-backs if they want to.
Again, right, one of those corners and one of those safeties. I agree.
Yeah, so that would be an offensive lineman, Julia Good-Jones, Kyle Lauletta, the quarterback, one of the running backs, rookie free agent guys. That's 3. 2 receivers we came up with. That would be 5. 2 D-backs and 1 defensive tackle, and that would be 8. And honestly, I don't think it really, really hurts the team that much based on the names that we went through. But if you did go to 75, as you just mentioned, and you had to add 5 more, then you're starting to get into a name of a guy that, we really wanted to see. And the Eagles really wanted to see what they could do this camp. And that would hurt.
Right. Now, here's another issue. Okay. As we move on here, if they add potentially a running back like McCoy, Devontae Freeman's going to be hard because of how much money he wants. He wants to be a starter. But let's say it's shady. Someone's got to go. You'd reported about Curry coming back. If he comes back, who's going to go? You've been taught, you had heard that it would be a surprise through one of your sources if they didn't sign a veteran linebacker. I agree with that. I would sign one. Right. And Geoff, why not a veteran outside? They do not need another slot corner. Please, no more slot corners. I think they can actually hold a team of slot corners. But what about a veteran outside corner? So
and that goes back to Trevor Williams.
Exactly.
Who I think. He did not play for Schwartz before, right? No, because he came over from
Chargers,
from the Chargers, but he played in a cover 3 style defense, right? That Jim likes to play a lot of cover 1, cover 3. So I didn't think it would be a difficult scheme adjustment for him, and I just that one's mind boggling. So I'm looking forward to figuring out.
Yeah, we'll find that. It won't be hard to find out, but
I do wonder how many of these will be addressed after camp as opposed to before camp.
You mean, what do you mean by that in terms of?
Well, you know how they have their initial 53 and then they pluck guys off the waiver wire from other teams.
Well, I would say this: the running back signing if they do should come within the next 2 weeks. Again, now if the veteran they sign is meeting their price, I had reported a couple months ago that they only want to pay a veteran minimum, maybe up to a 1.5 million in cash. That's it. That's why. Hyde was a no-go, though that was the guy they wanted. And Freeman's the guy they also liked. He was definitely a no-go because of how much money he wanted. I would think Curry, if they sign him as a veteran minimum, that would come very soon, obviously. They're not going to wait on that. And then veteran linebacker, Geoff, I don't know. Does it have to come now? Maybe they'd evaluate their guys.
Well, their history is that they normally sign those guys later in free agency, but before camp, right? Like Zach Brown and LJ Fort.
Yeah.
Those guys. I'm trying to think in the past. Nigel Bradham was earlier in free agency.
Oh yeah, that was in March, right?
Paul Warlow was, he never played, but he was earlier in free agency. This is not a position that they normally tend to address through the cut downs, but in this situation, maybe they would, or maybe Howie has a trade in mind in the middle of camp, which he's done before. He got Corey Graham in the middle of camp. He got the cornerback whose name escapes me now. From Florida State, Ronald Darby, was a trade in the middle of camp. So, although I just, you think about it, Adam, like, if you're making a trade in the middle of camp this year, what are you determining that on? I mean, there's not going to be preseason games. Yeah. I mean, these guys aren't going to be in.
Well, if the guys aren't doing well, Geoff, if they're not performing well in practice, because that's and we're going to get into what coaches told me about how they're preparing for camp. It's really crazy what they're having to do.
Yeah.
But before we get to that, I would say, to answer your question, all you can do is look at practice tape. That's it, because you don't have an off season. Virtual program is meaningless other than going over the playbook.
Mm-hmm.
And we're going to get into that because I've got a defensive coordinator gave me some good information about what he's using from that. But you can't get anything out of it other than training camp because there's no preseason games. There's no off season on the field.
Right. Plus, how willing are you going to be in this year, as opposed to other years, to bring in someone who's not familiar with your playbook, not familiar with your scheme?
You have to be a veteran, right?
Yeah, and then try to coach that guy into your organization with such little practice time. So I think
good point. Yep.
Yeah, you can't compare this kind of off season or training
unprecedented.
Very much so. Sure. All right, let's take a break real quick and thank our friends at PHLSportsNation.com, continuing to enhance the fan experience by covering all 4 Philly sports teams like nobody else can. They are for the fan, by the fan. That's their motto. Make sure you're checking out all their great content and podcasts. Follow them on Twitter also at PHLSportsNation, or go to their website, PHLSportsNation.com. We thank them for their affiliation. And also, we're going to pause right now for a quick word from our great sponsors. Okay, Adam, let's get into what you were alluding to in the last segment there, and that's the evaluation of players when you have potentially no preseason games, and it looks like that's going to be, and you're really not even going to start ramped up contact practices until about 2.5 weeks before the start of the season, right? So it's such a narrow amount of time and so many new players for the Eagles that I have to think that, and for every team, that even your evaluation process is going to be a little different this year.
Yeah. So I had a defense coordinator tell me last week that because they didn't have the players on the field. Now he didn't, this coach thought he was going to have 1 or 2 preseason games. Now, obviously they're not going to have any. That what he did is, and he had his position coaches do this. He told them to go back, because what you do is you get cut ups as a coach to prepare for the draft. Your GM gives you you get cut ups of by position. Okay, here's this game tape from last season. Mm-hmm. We're not giving you the whole season. We're giving you certain games. So what this guy said, he told his position coaches, you're going to go back and from the entire season. You're going to watch every game. We need to pick up stuff that we think they could learn and not learn because we didn't have them on the field. We're not going to preseason. We're going to shrink. We're going to ask them to do. We're going to give them stuff that we know they can do for sure. And obviously, now this is what he added. He goes, look, we had the virtual program. If there are high rep guys or stuff we have to repeat, high rep means you need to take more reps than the other players because you're struggling learning.
Mm-hmm.
If we have to keep repeating stuff, we're simply going to have to dumb it down. I don't know what else. I'm paraphrasing. He goes, we're going to have to shrink this thing so much that they could just get on the field. Just because you're smart intellectual, like you tested well, like let's say you had a high Wonderlic, does not mean you could process on the field. Mm-hmm. That's something that I've learned from evaluating the quarterback position. You'd be surprised. Alex Smith is a perfect example, Geoff.
Mm-hmm.
High test score. Christian Ponder, high test score, couldn't process very well. Never made it, Christian Ponder. They would overthink. They couldn't just focus on one thing and just master that. They couldn't do it, particularly Christian Ponder. But going back to what this D coordinator told him, he goes, we're going to have to do things we've never done before. We're strictly going to evaluate these players on college tape and just go, okay, based on our scheme, this is all they can do right now. And then if they get that, We're going to spoon feed him. Remember, you had reported that on Rager that the Eagles had a plan of giving maybe three or four things to learn, but Peterson said that they're going to start him at Deshaun Z position first.
Right.
That's all you can do. Peterson's right. Despite how smart Rager might have been in the offseason program, he has not been on the field. And guess what? He won't even have a preseason, Geoff, to evaluate.
Yeah. So how does that? I mean, it's funny for the younger players, and obviously Rager's going to be on the team. He's a first-round pick, but I'd go back to Corey Clement making the team. You make a good point. He didn't have the greatest training camp. They just saw potential in him. If you go back and look at his stats,
versatility.
He averaged like 3.2, 3.3 a carry. I don't know. Sometimes like these guys have these unbelievable training camps and they're averaging 5-6 yards, like a Henry Josie type of preseason thing, right?
Oh my God!
But he had potential, and they were patient with him, and they could learn, and he could be coached up by Deuce Staley. And I feel for some of these younger players who are going to make a lot of mistakes because they never had the OTAs, and then they're going to be judged by the college tape, but that might not be a reflection of who they are all these months later. But what are you going to do? You got nothing else to use.
No. I mean, quite frankly, right now, you got to go by what you know from previous tape and get back to Clement. The thing, his OTAs and mandatory OTAs were phenomenal. His training camp was great. Where I remember talking to the coaches in mid-August or late August, I'm like, "Hey, could this kid from Wisconsin, the undrafted kid, can he make it?" And they were all like, "Oh God, yeah, he doesn't even need preseason. He's on it." And whatever they thought the preseason tape was fine, good enough. It wasn't the average per carry, which you said wasn't high enough.
Right.
But they'd seen enough that you knew what he was doing. I was like, "Are you sure about this?" Because they got Pumphrey, although he was terrible, but Pumphrey and Sproles and Blunt, who, by the way, was over 260, I'm told, that training camp when he reported.
Linebacker.
Yeah, right, I know, but he God, who knew he would do as well as he would wind up doing. But yeah, it's a challenge, man. God, Geoff, I could not imagine trying to coach these guys. The rookies, and yes, you have last year's tape if they were with you last year, but they don't have the off season of learning and growing on that. They just don't have that.
Right. No, it's going to be a challenge. And, you and I will do our best, and we'll get the information on who's performing well, who's not. And there should be some pretty interesting podcasts in late July and in early August.
Correct.
As we try to figure out this 53-man roster eventually. I want to close this out by talking about linebackers because
this could take 3 hours though, brother.
No, I know that could be its own podcast.
Yeah,
but,
exactly.
As you know, we've been doing a series on InsideTheBirds.com, myself and Andrew DeCecco, a kind of a previewing the season. Every single day we pick a category and write about it. And one of the days was, what is the weakest spot on the defense? And there really was no other argument. There was nothing for Andrew and I to debate. It was
Has there ever been an argument?
Oh yeah. Sometimes we pick different. Yeah.
No. But back at
not on this part.
I mean, decades, man. Other than when Stuart Bradley was there, and at 17 it wasn't bad, but man, it for the most part since Howie Roseman's been the GM, that has been the weak spot. Though in free agency they've done well with Barwin. He was an outside linebacker in 34.
Trade markets. They brought in D'Amico.
Great trade, right?
D'Amico Ryans but
free agency's been great. You mentioned Bradham. Camus Grugier Hill was a great waiver claim, and Najee Good. He was here 5 years. People forget. I thought it was 2 or 3 when I looked. I'm like 5 years. Wow.
Yeah.
But
we both agreed that this year's collection of linebackers is just really inadequate, and so we got a message on InsideTheBirds.com on the Facebook group page from Andre Smith, who's a good poster. He posts a lot.
Yeah.
And he kind of asked, well, what specifically do we need our linebackers to do that this current group can't? And he makes the mention that, if the Eagles have cap issues, doesn't it make sense that they have these low investment starters? And, nobody's out there saying that they're all pros, but why do we think that they can't at least get the job done? And I wanted to comment on that because I'm not all of a sudden saying that linebacker is really important. I think you and I talk about this all the time. We know how they feel about the position, but the question is, could it be better? Could they have built this linebacker core better? Can you draft better or devote more resources to linebackers since you're not going to be big spenders in free agency? And I think the answer is yes. And you mentioned 2017. I mean, you had Nigel Bradham, who is a good free agent signing, a veteran, which this team does not right now have, a veteran 3-down linebacker, right?
Correct.
They also had a second-round pick in Michael Kendricks, who was the third linebacker, and they had a third-round pick in Jordan Hicks, who was played better than his third-round status. So they actually had pretty decent crew of linebackers there without spending a whole lot of money or really high draft capital like a first-round pick in one. And, the Eagles had an opportunity in the second round there was Logan Wilson was around. Those two guys who went to the Bengals were there. Bailey
Wilson was the first pick in the third, but yes.
He was the first pick in the third, but they went with Jalen Hurts.
Right.
Yeah. And honestly, I have questioned that decision just as you have many times. And I really think that, Jim Schwartz would love a linebacker. Like if you're not going to spend a lot of money on one and you're going to pass on a guy like Kenneth Murray in the first round, then I think you do have to pay a little bit better attention to that position in the draft and hit on the guys that you do draft.
All right, so let's start with the latter. So you talked about getting Schwartz a linebacker. They got him. That Davion Taylor pick was helping Schwartz out. That's just my sense because they didn't take Kenneth Murray in the first round. You mentioned that they didn't take a linebacker in the second round. And look, their weak spot cannot be argued against. Linebacker is by far the worst position on the football team. It's below average in talent. Now, let's look at Roseman's philosophy. Yes, he did not have personnel control until Andy Reid left. He's had it mostly since Andy Reid left, save for the year that Chip Kelly took over in 2015 when he drafted Jordan Hicks. It was actually a great pick by he and Ed Manowitz. But if you look at 2010 and 2011, the two things that stood out, the draft capital they spent was not high. They started in the fourth round, no higher, and the size. Keenan Clayton was basically a safety. He used to play safety in college. Converted to linebacker. He did not work out at all. Jamar Chaney was a late-round flyer from Mississippi State. By the way, Jamar's back there now, coaching. He's smaller. Casey Matthews is undersized. Athletic, but, man, he was not very good. Brian Roll was too small. Greg Lloyd was not like his dad. He was not a good enough football player. But you see the draft capital that they spent, Geoff. They just did not spend high-value draft picks in the beginning until you said 2012 when they drafted Kendricks in the second round. 2013, no linebackers. Marcus Smith was drafted playing outside linebacker. It was Roseman's call with input from Chip Kelly to play outside linebacker in their 34 then. Remember, under Chip, Billy Davis coached them. Their defense, he was the defense coordinator. They transitioned for the first time ever as a 34. Jordan Hicks was, as you mentioned, a home run pick. In terms of talent, he outperformed that third round status. $10 million a year to play linebacker for the Cardinals. Wow. Then Joe Walker would have made it, but he tore his ACL in the preseason game, and he was a seventh rounder in 16. 17, 18, 19, Geoff. Not one linebacker. How do you not do that?
Not one linebacker. And then also this year, the one you do take in the third round is a guy who's considered, like you mentioned, a project, a little bit raw, probably not going to be, unless he exceeds expectations, a 3-down linebacker, maybe more of a coverage kind of guy.
He'll be a nickel linebacker. Right.
Yeah.
Right.
And so like, I mean,
later on, by the way, later on.
Right. I'm not saying that they need to go out and pay $10 million. I wasn't upset that they let Jordan Hicks walk. I understood their philosophy, but to go back to Andre's point, when he says, why does everybody assume that Davion Taylor and Bradley can't play as a third and a sixth round pick when TJ Edwards made it last year as an undrafted free agent? I would say to that, well, that's cherry picking one guy who beat the odds as opposed to all the players, Adam, you just mentioned, who were either draft picks or rookie free agents that they like that didn't make it, right? So there's just as many examples of guys that actually could not play and were drafted as there are a guy who beat the odds and made it in TJ Edwards, who, by the way, is a nice player, but he's really only a 1 to 2 down linebacker. What this team doesn't have, there's two things. They don't have a 3-down linebacker, a good one in my opinion. And secondly, if Edwards were to get hurt, who would be their natural middle run stopping linebacker? Who would be that first and second?
No
down?
No
one. They don't have guys who are known for being great downhill tacklers. And so you can't just go into the season with one guy being able to perform a really important function. They play in a division where they're going to see Ezekiel Elliott, Saquon Barkley, and maybe a healthy Darius Geis. But on top of that, Adam, these teams are all kind of struggling offensively coming into their own. They're probably going to be teams that rely a little heavier on the run game. I'm talking about Giants, Washington. I don't know about Dallas as much, but Dallas does have Zeke. You got to stop those guys.
Yeah, so the thinking is that their D-line, particularly tackle, is going to be so dominant that it'll help protect the linebackers, but you can, it's almost a fallacy. There's some truth to that, but you can't say that's your overall way that you're going to win. You're just going to protect the linebackers because you're bigger up front and more talented. Mm-hmm. But these guys still, as you just said, if Barkley is running at you, who do you have who's physical enough to stop? TJ Edwards obviously looks like he would be a good run stopper because that's really his forte. But when you, just from a macro level, when you look at, there have been 11 linebackers drafted since Roseman was the GM in 2010. He was not the GM in 15. That was Jordan Hicks. Okay. The first 5 linebackers, I know he didn't have control, but he was the GM when it happened. The first 5 linebackers were misses. Clayton, Chaney, Matthews, Roll, Lloyd, all misses. Kendricks hit. Kendricks hit, no doubt. Mm-hmm. Good. That was a good pick. Marcus Smith, bust, miss. Joe Walker.
I always exclude him because he's a 3-4 outside linebacker.
Right. I know you could argue that one, but it was a miss. But it was Howie's call with Chip's input. Joe Walker was actually, I'll tell you what, that's an incomplete because he tore his ACL, and what can you do?
Yeah, but you can come back from an ACL. If he was any good, he'd be in the league right now, starting for some. Or
well, he was with the Cardinals though. But okay, and again, they didn't draft any. What's that? And they didn't draft any for 3 seasons. So I'd have to argue, Geoff. Yeah, they really have not addressed it properly. That I know because people want answers.
Right.
I think their evaluations for the most part have been off. They change. One thing I want to mention, which I failed to mention, they've changed. Well, not totally, but they've changed a little bit of their size philosophy. They're not still drafting 5'9" guys who weigh about 210. Mm-hmm. King Clayton was too small. Chaney was too small. Right. Brian Roll was too small. Keithy Matthews was who's that?
I threw Akeem Jordan.
Oh, that was before that. Oh my God! You know, it's so funny to research the subject. I forgot. One year, their starting linebackers were Jordan, Foku, and another guy who never made it. I cannot remember, but I'm like, how could you put these guys out there? It's because your philosophy is, okay, we'll just start. Those are guys we think could fit the scheme, but just not good enough football players. That's got to change, man. Now, Taylor, if it works, you were talking about it. If it works, he will not, despite their lack of talent at linebacker right now, I still would be shocked if he dresses every week. Because he is a project. They project him by year 3 to be their starting nickel, one of their 2 starting nickel linebackers. And because teams play 65 to 70% nickel, that's got a lot of value. Now, you could argue, should have that been a 5th-round pick because of that or 3rd-round pick? That's an argument that you could have. Sean Bradley, talking to other teams, strictly a special teams linebacker.
Yeah. So, well, I mean, we'll be talking about linebacker for a bit, but that's my linebacker rant. That's my rationale for why I'm not as listen. And again, I understand that it's not what they value, but I feel like this collection of linebackers is certainly their least talented in quite a while. So we'll see how that impacts the team going forward, or if Howie Roseman moves to bring somebody else in. His last statement is a podcast in itself, and that's. This is Andre Smith again. As a fan for 40 plus years, I've never been more impressed and confident in our team's building strategies. Well, I'm not as quite with Andre on that. So, but that's a whole level.
I am, but right. But Geoff, here's my question to you. Do you like the way they're building the roster, but they're just missing a linebacker? Because that's where I'm at.
Well, we're counting the draft as part of team building strategy, right?
Right. So go ahead. So what do you mean?
I was very vocal after the draft that I felt like there seemed to be an emphasis on a certain style of player this year because of what they've been missing in the past. Right. And I'm not a fan. I talk to many teams just like you and sources, and I like teams that have their fit of what a good football player is and draft that football player and don't have a kind of wavering philosophy from year to year that's based on what they were missing in the years past. I think.
So I think, okay, as you say that, this is what my thought process would be. Some people wanted the Eagles to draft Kenneth Murray. Okay, I know fans wanted Kenneth Murray or they wanted Justin Jefferson. Though I believe Rager will wind up being better than Justin Jefferson. We'll see. We're not going to know for at least 3 years kind of where that's at. Mm-hmm. Kenneth Murray, you talk to any other team, was the highest graded player on their board. Now I'm talking about other teams' board. We don't have access to the Eagles board, but I believe, and you just said it in passing, I strongly believe that they did what you just said. They drafted Rager because he was more of we need speed, we need receivers. Okay, that's true. But if you take the best player That's Kenneth Murray. Would you agree with that?
Yes, I would.
And that plays into your point,
I'm
I
not
believe,
100%
right?
sure this team over the last few years has always taken the best player available. And I'm not even sure that they continuously preach when they practice that. So we'll see. I mean, the draft from a couple of years ago, 2017, does not look very good right now. It's got a chance to look better, but I always say if I'm wrong, I'll admit it. But right now, I'm just not loving how they've been going.
Well, playing into what you just said, 2016, that was when Joe Douglas had not gotten there. Mm-hmm. Tom Donahoe, I'm told, ran the draft. He set the board. They were incredibly strict. By the way, it happened to be Howie Roseman's best draft by far. Right. You have potentially two of the best players. Obviously, Wentz may wind up being the Eagles' best quarterback ever. Mm-hmm. But you look at that draft, they only missed a one player. And quite frankly, the DB's name escapes me right now, who came back. He was with the Rams. They
want to cut.
Yes, thank you. Yeah, he came back, but that was a home run draft. So one of these days we'll have a draft, just an evaluation of the draft show. Quite frankly, with training camp starting so late, with practices not starting until right on August 15th or right before it, we may be running out of stuff to say when maybe we do a draft review show. Uh-huh. But I would agree with your assessment. It would be nice if they stick to their board that, Geoff said, like, maybe they should have taken Logan Wilson the second round. Well, look, they clearly took a quarterback there because they were wanting to buck the trend. And I've never seen a team take a quarterback in the second round who they believe will only be a backup for them. It's something I'm starting to – I know that they would like to pay less for the backup quarterbacks, and that clearly right now going forward, that's what they're doing. That's definitely true. Mm-hmm. But the philosophy, just so we can wrap this up, I just wish they would get back to, and I like the Rager pick. I'm not even arguing against that. But throughout the draft, I have a hard time believing Davion Taylor was the best player on the board in the third round. We're going to have to investigate that one, Geoff, because I know you and I have talked to other teams, and not that teams didn't like him, but man, he is a down the road project.
Yeah. Definitely on that. So we'll end it there, and that'll do it for this edition of Inside the Birds, the leading podcast in Eagles Intel. I want to thank, as we always do, our producer, Hunter Brody. Check out his work on YouTube. It's called Sports Talk with Broads. Check out his podcast also with former Villanova basketball star Darrell Reynolds. It's called Processed. It's about the 76ers, who are starting up very soon here. And make sure you check out Hunter's work on Twitter at Broads81. And, of course, we thank you for flying with us inside the bird.